Korthak's massive claws tapped against the polished obsidian table as he reviewed the quarterly reports from his mining empire. The dragon's golden scales caught the artificial light of his orbital headquarters, casting dancing reflections across the walls lined with certificates of conquest. Each document represented another world stripped bare, another species displaced, another fortune added to his already immeasurable wealth. The Draconian Empire had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years, and Korthak embodied everything that made his species supreme. At 12 feet tall with wings that could blot out suns, he commanded respect through fear and accumulated power through ruthless efficiency. His mining corporation, Flame Industries, had turned entire solar systems into industrial complexes, feeding the endless hunger of draconian civilization. Today's meeting concerned the newest acquisition, Earth's solar system. The humans had finally surrendered after their pathetic resistance crumbled before draconian might. Korthak barely remembered the details. Humans were just another weak species that had fallen before superior strength, no different from the hundreds of others his empire had conquered. "Sir, the transport is ready for your inspection tour of the Earth facility," announced his aide, a nervous-looking reptilian creature whose species had served dragons for millennia. The aide's voice trembled slightly, as it should. Korthak did not tolerate incompetence, and his reputation for dealing with failure was legendary throughout the corporate hierarchy. Korthak rose from his throne-like chair, his presence filling the room with an aura of barely contained power. His personal shuttle awaited, a sleek vessel designed to project dominance wherever it landed. The journey to Earth would take 6 hours, giving him time to review the facility reports and plan the expansion that would strip every useful resource from the human homeworld. The Earth mining facility sprawled across what humans had once called the American Midwest. Massive excavation equipment tore into the planet's crust, extracting rare minerals essential to draconian technology. The operation employed thousands of human workers who had been deemed useful enough to keep alive, though their living conditions were barely adequate by galactic standards. Korthak's shuttle landed at the facility's main platform with enough force to crack the concrete beneath. He emerged slowly, allowing his full size and presence to register with the assembled facility managers who had gathered to greet him. Several of them stepped back involuntarily, their survival instincts recognizing a predator that could end their lives with casual ease. "Status report," Korthak's voice rumbled like distant thunder. His communications implant translated his words into the local language, though his tone needed no translation. Every creature in the galaxy understood the sound of absolute authority backed by lethal capability. The facility manager, a smaller dragon named Vortek, immediately began rattling off production figures and efficiency metrics. Korthak listened with half his attention while his eyes surveyed the operation. The humans worked steadily under the watchful gaze of draconian supervisors, their movements careful and precise. They had learned quickly that mistakes were not tolerated. "What about the service sector?" Korthak interrupted. "I require sustenance before I inspect the extraction sites." Vortek gestured toward a building that had been converted into a dining facility for visiting corporate executives. "We have established a restaurant that meets draconian standards, sir. The human staff has been trained to serve our kind properly." Korthak nodded curtly and strode toward the building, his heavy footsteps echoing across the facility grounds. Behind him, his entourage of assistants and security personnel followed at a respectful distance. The humans they passed quickly moved out of the way, their eyes fixed on the ground. They had learned that looking directly at a dragon could be interpreted as a challenge, and challenges were rarely survived. The restaurant's interior had been modified to accommodate draconian physiology. High ceilings allowed for wing movement, reinforced furniture could support massive weight, and the heating system maintained the elevated temperatures dragons preferred. The human staff wore simple uniforms and moved efficiently between tables, their training evident in every gesture. Korthak chose a table near the center of the room where he could observe everything around him. His security detail took positions at strategic points while his business associates arranged themselves at nearby tables. The atmosphere was thick with the tension that always surrounded him, a combination of fear and the desperate desire to avoid drawing his attention for the wrong reasons. A human waitress approached his table with careful, measured steps. Korthak glanced at her briefly, noting nothing particularly remarkable. She was young by human standards, with dark hair pulled back and eyes that met his gaze for exactly the appropriate duration before looking away. Her name tag read Sarah. "Welcome to our establishment," she said, her voice steady despite the slight tremor he could detect. "May I bring you our menu, or would you prefer to hear today's recommendations?" The words were perfectly scripted, exactly what his species expected from service workers. Korthak was about to respond with his usual dismissive order when movement caught his attention. From behind Sarah emerged a small human child, perhaps 8 years old by their species' reckoning. The boy moved strangely, his steps uneven and his left arm hanging limply at his side. "I apologize, sir," Sarah said quickly, moving to intercept the child. "My son wasn't supposed to be in the dining area during service hours." Korthak's eyes narrowed as he studied the small human. The boy's condition was obvious even to his limited knowledge of human physiology. Some kind of neurological damage that affected his motor control and speech. In draconian society, such individuals were eliminated at birth as a matter of practical efficiency. Weakness was not tolerated, and resources were not wasted on those who could not contribute to the Empire's strength. "Mom," the boy said, his words slightly slurred but understandable. "The kitchen needs more plates." "Should I help carry them?" Sarah's face went pale. Korthak realized she was terrified that her offspring's presence would anger him, perhaps resulting in punishment or termination. In the draconian hierarchy, personal problems that interfered with work performance were grounds for immediate dismissal, often accompanied by more permanent consequences. What happened next surprised everyone present, perhaps most of all Korthak himself. Instead of roaring in anger or demanding the child's removal, he found himself studying the interaction with unexpected interest. The boy looked up at his mother with complete trust, despite his obvious physical limitations. Sarah's hand rested gently on her son's shoulder, protective but not possessive. "What is wrong with the youngling?" Korthak asked, his voice lower than usual but still carrying its characteristic rumble. Sarah swallowed hard before answering. "He was born with cerebral palsy, sir. It affects his movement and coordination, but his mind is." She paused, clearly struggling with whether to continue. "His mind is what?" Korthak prompted, genuinely curious now. "Sharp, sir. Very sharp. He sees patterns and connections that others miss. He helps organize the kitchen inventory and has improved our efficiency by 15%. The Dragon CEO leaned forward slightly, his massive head tilting as he examined the small human with new interest. In the draconian corporate structure, efficiency was the highest virtue. Results mattered more than appearance or conventional capability. Yet this damaged youngling had somehow contributed meaningfully to operations. "Show me," Korthak commanded. Sarah hesitated for a moment, then looked down at her son. "Jamie, can you explain to the gentleman how you reorganized the storage system?" The boy's face lit up with enthusiasm despite the intimidating presence looming over him. He began speaking, his words careful but excited, describing how he had noticed patterns in order timing and ingredient usage. His solution had reduced waste and improved preparation speed, exactly the kind of optimization that impressed draconian executives. As Jamie spoke, something unprecedented happened in Korthak's experience. The boy looked directly at him without fear, his eyes bright with intelligence and passion for his subject. In 3 millennia of existence, Korthak had never seen such a combination of vulnerability and strength. The youngling was physically weak by any measure, yet he possessed something that even the mighty dragons often lacked: the courage to pursue excellence despite overwhelming disadvantages. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Vortek, who had been searching for his superior. The facility manager's eyes widened in horror when he saw Korthak engaged in conversation with human workers, particularly one accompanied by what he clearly viewed as defective offspring. "Sir, I deeply apologize for this interruption," Vortek said, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "These humans should not have bothered you. I will have them removed immediately and ensure proper disciplinary action is taken." Korthak raised one massive claw, a gesture that froze everyone in the room. "You will do nothing of the kind," he rumbled, his tone carrying a warning that made Vortek step back involuntarily. The facility manager's confusion was evident, but he knew better than to question a direct order from someone so far above him in the corporate hierarchy. Sarah clutched her son closer, uncertain what was happening but sensing that the situation had taken an unexpected turn. Tell me about your operations here, Korthak said to Vortek, but his eyes remained on the human family. What is your efficiency rating compared to other facilities of similar size? Vortek rattled off statistics that painted a picture of adequate but unremarkable performance. The Earth facility met basic production quotas but showed no innovation or exceptional results. It was exactly the kind of mediocre operation that Korthak typically replaced with automated systems and reduced workforce. And, yet, Korthak mused, this youngling has identified improvements that your management team missed. Explain to me how a damaged human child accomplishes what trained draconian supervisors cannot. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Vortek's face went through several color changes as he struggled to formulate a response that wouldn't sound like an admission of incompetence. Around the room, other diners had fallen silent, sensing the tension of a moment that could reshape careers and lives. Jamie looked up at the massive dragon with the same fearless curiosity he had shown before. Sir, would you like to see the efficiency charts I made? I can show you 3 more improvements we could implement next week. The offer was made with such simple confidence that it struck Korthak like a physical blow. This small, damaged creature was offering to help improve operations for an empire that had conquered his world and enslaved his species. There was no resentment in his voice, no hidden agenda, just genuine enthusiasm for solving problems and making things work better. For the first time in centuries, Korthak found himself truly surprised. In all his experience with conquered species, he had never encountered anything like this combination of weakness and strength, vulnerability and capability. The boy represented everything dragons despised in terms of physical prowess, yet embodied everything they valued in terms of mental acuity and drive for improvement. Yes, Korthak said finally. Show me your charts. What followed was 15 minutes that would later be analyzed and debated throughout the corporate hierarchy. A dragon CEO worth more than entire star systems sat in a converted human restaurant while an 8-year-old boy with cerebral palsy explained optimization strategies using hand-drawn diagrams on recycled paper. Jamie's presentation was remarkable not just for its content but for its clarity. Despite his speech difficulties, he communicated complex ideas with precision and enthusiasm. His suggestions were practical, implementable, and demonstrated a deep understanding of operational dynamics that impressed even Korthak's experienced eye. More importantly, the boy's attitude revealed something about human nature that challenged every assumption Korthak had made about conquered species. Jamie wasn't working to gain favor or avoid punishment. He was solving problems because he enjoyed finding solutions, helping because he wanted to contribute, learning because knowledge excited him. When the presentation ended, silence filled the restaurant. Every dragon present struggled to process what they had witnessed. In their society, weakness was eliminated and strength was rewarded through rigid hierarchies. The concept of finding value in unexpected places or nurturing potential despite obvious limitations was completely foreign to their way of thinking. Korthak studied the small human for a long moment, his massive head tilted in thought. Your suggestions have merit, he said finally. Implementation would improve efficiency by approximately 12% while reducing operational costs by 7%. Jamie's face broke into a wide grin. Really? That's even better than I calculated. I might have missed some variables in the supply chain analysis. The casual acknowledgement of potential error, combined with excitement about the results rather than personal credit, struck Korthak as profoundly unusual. In draconian culture, admitting uncertainty was seen as weakness, and sharing credit was viewed as foolishness. Yet this youngling seemed genuinely more interested in accuracy than in appearing infallible. What other projects are you working on? Korthak asked, ignoring the shocked expressions of his entourage. Jamie launched into an explanation of 3 other optimization ideas he was developing, each more innovative than the last. His mother Sarah stood beside him, pride and terror warring in her expression. She understood that her son was somehow impressing one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy, but she also knew that such attention could be dangerous if it shifted in the wrong direction. As Jamie spoke, Korthak found himself reconsidering fundamental assumptions about capability and value. The Draconian Empire had built its success on identifying and cultivating strength while eliminating weakness. Yet here was evidence that their definitions might be inadequate. This youngling possessed cognitive abilities that rivaled trained specialists, creative thinking that surpassed experienced managers, and communication skills that made complex ideas accessible. Perhaps most intriguingly, Jamie's condition seemed to contribute to rather than detract from his capabilities. His different way of processing information led to insights that conventional thinking might miss. His experience with physical limitations had taught him to find alternative solutions to standard problems. His unusual perspective revealed opportunities that normal observation overlooked. The implications were staggering. If the dragons had been systematically eliminating individuals like Jamie, how much potential innovation had they destroyed? How many solutions to complex problems had been lost because they focused only on conventional measures of strength and capability? The question extended beyond individual cases to entire species and civilizations. Earth was scheduled for complete resource extraction, its population relocated to labor camps on less desirable worlds. But, if humans could produce individuals like Jamie, beings who found opportunity in limitation and strength in apparent weakness, perhaps their value extended beyond simple manual labor. Korthak's contemplation was interrupted by an urgent communication from his personal assistant. A priority message from the corporate board required his immediate attention. He glanced at the transmission details and realized that his extended stay at the restaurant had already been noticed by his superiors, who were demanding an explanation for the delay in his inspection schedule. Standing to his full height, Korthak looked down at Jamie and Sarah. The boy was still holding his hand-drawn charts, his eyes bright with enthusiasm for the projects they had discussed. His mother maintained her protective stance, ready to shield her son from any threat but unable to do anything against the power Korthak represented. "I will review your suggestions with my technical staff," Korthak announced formally. "If implementation proceeds as projected, there may be opportunities for expanded consultation." The words were carefully chosen to maintain his authority while acknowledging Jamie's contribution. In the complex hierarchy of draconian society, such recognition from a CEO was unprecedented for any conquered species, let alone a disabled child of a servant race. As he prepared to leave, Korthak made a decision that would have consequences far beyond what anyone in that restaurant could imagine. "Vortek, I want detailed reports on any operational improvements implemented here. This facility will serve as a test case for new efficiency protocols." The order was couched in corporate language, but its meaning was clear to those who understood draconian business culture. The Earth facility had just received special attention from the highest levels of the corporate hierarchy. Success could lead to expanded operations and improved conditions for human workers. Failure would result in consequences too severe to contemplate. Korthak strode from the restaurant without another word, his entourage hurrying to keep pace. Behind him, he left a room full of stunned dragons trying to process what they had witnessed and two humans whose lives had just taken an unimaginable turn. As his shuttle lifted off from the facility platform, Korthak stared down at the mining operation below. Somewhere in that complex of machines and workers was a small boy whose ideas might change how the entire empire thought about capability and value. The Dragon CEO had built his fortune on recognizing opportunity where others saw only obstacles, and something told him that Jamie represented the kind of opportunity that came along perhaps once in a lifetime. The journey back to his orbital headquarters gave Korthak time to consider the implications of the day's events. For 3,000 years, draconian civilization had operated on principles of strength, hierarchy, and the elimination of weakness. Those principles had built the greatest empire the galaxy had ever known. Yet a disabled human child had just demonstrated capabilities that challenged everything dragons thought they knew about intelligence, innovation, and value. The question now was what to do with that knowledge. Korthak had not achieved his position by ignoring potential advantages, regardless of their source. If humans possessed untapped capabilities that could benefit draconian interests, then exploring those capabilities made sound business sense. The fact that such exploration might also improve conditions for conquered species was merely a secondary consideration, though not an entirely unwelcome one. By the time his shuttle docked with his headquarters, Korthak had made his decision. The Earth facility would indeed serve as a test case, but not just for operational efficiency. It would become a laboratory for discovering whether weakness and strength, limitation and capability might be more complex than draconian culture had traditionally assumed. The implications of that experiment would reshape an empire, but first they would transform the lives of a waitress and her extraordinary son who had somehow found the courage to trust a dragon with their hopes for a better future. 3 months after his visit to the Earth facility, Korthak found himself doing something unprecedented in his 3 millennia of existence. He was returning to check on the progress of a human child's suggestions. The corporate board had questioned his interest in what they termed minor operational adjustments, but the results spoke for themselves. The Earth facility had improved its efficiency ratings by 18%, exceeded production quotas for 12 consecutive weeks, and reduced operational costs beyond even Jamie's optimistic projections. The success had attracted attention throughout the corporate hierarchy. Facility managers from across the empire were demanding to know what innovations had produced such remarkable improvements. When they learned that the changes originated from a disabled human child, the reactions ranged from disbelief to outrage to desperate attempts to replicate the results at their own operations. Korthak's second arrival at the Earth facility was notably different from his first. Word of his interest in human insights had spread throughout the draconian corporate structure, and Vorthak had transformed the restaurant into a showcase of human potential. The dining area now featured detailed displays showing productivity improvements, cost reductions, and efficiency innovations that had emerged from what the facility manager carefully termed alternative consultation sources. Sarah was waiting when Korthak entered, but this time she stood with confidence rather than fear. Her uniform had been upgraded to reflect her new status as liaison between human workers and draconian management. More importantly, her son Jamie had been given official recognition as an efficiency consultant, complete with access to facility operations and regular meetings with supervisory staff. "Welcome back, sir," Sarah said, her voice steady and professional. "Jamie has been looking forward to showing you the results of the implementations." The boy emerged from behind his mother with the same fearless enthusiasm Korthak remembered, but now he carried a tablet displaying complex charts and graphs rather than hand-drawn diagrams on scrap paper. His presentation setup was sophisticated, his data comprehensive, and his analysis more detailed than many reports Korthak received from senior executives. "Sir, the supply chain optimization exceeded our target by 6%, Jamie began, his speech clearer and more confident than before. "But I found 3 additional bottlenecks we could address for even better results." As Jamie launched into his presentation, Korthak realized that something fundamental had changed during his absence. The boy's ideas had evolved beyond simple efficiency improvements into comprehensive system analysis. His understanding of the facility's operations now rivaled that of trained engineers, and his suggestions demonstrated strategic thinking that impressed even Korthak's experienced judgment. More significantly, Jamie's success had begun to influence other human workers. The presentation included contributions from maintenance staff who had identified equipment improvements, kitchen workers who had streamlined meal service, and even cleaning crews who had developed more effective sanitation protocols. The disabled boy's example had awakened problem-solving capabilities throughout the human workforce that had previously gone unrecognized. "Remarkable," Korthak rumbled after reviewing the comprehensive data. "These improvements represent a fundamental shift in operational philosophy." Jamie nodded eagerly. "The best part is that every improvement makes other improvements possible. Like when we fixed the supply timing, it gave us better data for predicting maintenance needs, which let us schedule repairs more efficiently, which reduced downtime and created opportunities for further optimization." The concept of cascading improvements was familiar to Korthak from his business experience, but seeing it implemented by a human child who had been considered worthless by draconian standards was profoundly unsettling. It challenged every assumption about capability, value, and the nature of intelligence itself. "What other projects are you developing?" Korthak asked, settling into his reinforced chair with the weight of someone preparing for a lengthy discussion. Jamie's face lit up with the kind of enthusiasm that only came from genuine passion for his work. He began describing a series of innovations that went far beyond facility operations. His ideas included improvements to mining equipment design, worker safety protocols, and even modifications to the transportation systems used to move extracted materials off-planet. Each suggestion was backed by careful analysis and demonstrated understanding of complex engineering principles that Jamie had somehow mastered despite having no formal technical education. His approach combined creativity with rigorous logic, intuitive leaps with methodical verification, and ambitious vision with practical implementation strategies. Korthak found himself increasingly impressed not just by the ideas themselves but by the mind that had generated them. Jamie's disability had forced him to develop alternative ways of processing information and solving problems. Instead of relying on conventional approaches, he had learned to see patterns and connections that others missed. His limitations had become the source of his greatest strengths. The presentation was interrupted by the arrival of an unexpected visitor. Zarek, one of Korthak's primary rivals within the corporate hierarchy, had apparently decided to investigate the source of the Earth facility's remarkable success. The massive dragon's entrance was clearly intended to intimidate, his presence radiating the kind of barely controlled aggression that had built his own mining empire. "So this is the famous human pet that has captured your attention," Zarek said, his voice dripping with disdain. "I confess myself curious to see what all the excitement is about." The insult was obvious and intentional. In draconian culture, referring to another executive's interests as pets was a direct challenge to their judgment and authority. Zarek was testing whether Korthak's fascination with human capabilities had weakened his position within the corporate power structure. Jamie looked up at the new arrival without flinching, though Sarah moved protectively closer to her son. The boy's expression showed curiosity rather than fear, as if Zarek were simply another puzzle to be understood and analyzed. "Are you here to review the efficiency improvements too?" Jamie asked with genuine interest. "I could show you how the optimization protocols might work at other facilities." The question was asked with such innocent directness that it caught Zarek off guard. The massive dragon had expected cowering subservience from a conquered species, not enthusiastic offers of professional consultation. His expression shifted from contempt to confusion as he struggled to process this unexpected response. Korthak watched the interaction with sharp attention. This moment would determine whether his experiment with human potential could survive the skepticism and hostility of the corporate hierarchy. Zarek represented the traditional draconian view that saw conquered species as resources to be exploited rather than minds to be consulted. "The youngling's suggestions have produced measurable results," Korthak said carefully. "Perhaps you would benefit from reviewing his analysis before forming conclusions about its value." The challenge was subtle but unmistakable. Korthak was betting his own reputation that Jamie's capabilities would speak for themselves. If the boy failed to impress Zarek, it would be seen as evidence that Korthak had lost his edge for identifying genuine opportunities. Zarek studied Jamie with the predatory gaze of a dragon evaluating potential prey. "Very well," he rumbled. "Show me these remarkable innovations that have supposedly revolutionized your operations." What followed was perhaps the most important presentation of Jamie's young life. The disabled human child found himself explaining complex optimization strategies to one of the most powerful and dangerous beings in the galaxy. His audience included not just Zarek but several other dragons who had arrived to witness what they viewed as either a breakthrough or a catastrophic failure of judgment. Jamie rose to the challenge with remarkable composure. His presentation was flawless, his data compelling, and his explanations clear enough for even skeptical dragons to understand. More importantly, he demonstrated the kind of quick thinking and adaptability that draconian culture valued above almost everything else. When Zarek posed aggressive questions designed to expose weaknesses in Jamie's logic, the boy responded with thoughtful analysis that often revealed flaws in the questioner's assumptions. When challenged about implementation costs, Jamie produced detailed financial projections that showed substantial return on investment. When pressed about scalability, he outlined modification strategies for different facility types and operational contexts. The presentation reached its climax when Zarek demanded proof that Jamie's methods could work beyond the specific conditions of the Earth facility. The boy's response was to pull up operational data from 3 other mining installations and demonstrate how his optimization principles could be adapted to their unique circumstances. His analysis revealed improvement opportunities that had been overlooked by experienced draconian managers for decades. The room fell silent as the implications became clear. Jamie had just demonstrated that his problem-solving capabilities extended far beyond his specific environment. His methods were transferable, scalable, and potentially applicable throughout the empire. The disabled human child possessed insights that could benefit every draconian operation in the galaxy. Zarek's expression had gradually shifted from skepticism to grudging respect to something approaching awe. He was experiencing the same cognitive dissonance that had struck Korthak during his first encounter with Jamie. Everything about draconian culture insisted that this small, damaged creature should be worthless, yet the evidence of his capabilities was undeniable. Impressive, Zarek admitted finally, the word seeming to cause him physical pain. The analysis is sound, the projections are realistic, and the implementation strategies are well conceived. The admission sent ripples of shock through the assembled dragons. Zarek's acknowledgement meant that Jamie's capabilities were now officially recognized at the highest levels of the corporate hierarchy. The boy had passed a test that most trained executives would have failed, and he had done it while representing a species that was considered barely above slave labor. Korthak felt a satisfaction that went beyond mere business success. His gamble on human potential had paid off, but, more importantly, it had opened possibilities that none of them had imagined. If one disabled human child could demonstrate such remarkable capabilities, what other untapped potential existed among conquered species throughout the Empire? "I have a proposition," Zarek announced, his voice carrying the formal tone dragons used for serious business negotiations. "I want this human to consult on operations at my Titan facility. The improvements he has demonstrated here could be worth millions of credits if properly implemented." The offer was simultaneously flattering and dangerous. Recognition from Zarek would establish Jamie's reputation throughout the corporate hierarchy, but it would also expose him to the ruthless competition that characterized draconian business culture. Success could lead to unprecedented opportunities, while failure might result in consequences that Sarah and Jamie could not survive. Korthak studied the human family carefully. Sarah's expression showed a mixture of pride and terror as she realized that her son was being offered opportunities that no human had ever received. Jamie himself seemed primarily excited about the chance to work on new and more complex problems, apparently oblivious to the risks involved in drawing so much high-level attention. "The decision rests with them," Korthak said finally. "This is their choice to make." The statement was revolutionary by draconian standards. Conquered species were not typically given choices about their assignments, especially not choices that involved working with senior executives. By offering Jamie and Sarah the option to accept or decline Zarek's proposal, Korthak was implicitly acknowledging their agency and value as individuals rather than property. Sarah looked down at her son, who was practically vibrating with excitement at the prospect of new challenges. She understood the dangers better than he did, but she also recognized that this opportunity might represent their only chance to build a better future. The alternative was to remain safely insignificant in the brutal hierarchy that controlled their lives. "We accept," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the decision. Jamie's whoop of excitement echoed through the restaurant, drawing smiles from unexpected sources. Even some of the dragons seemed amused by his obvious enthusiasm for what they viewed as a tremendously challenging assignment. The boy's joy was infectious, creating a moment of shared optimism that transcended the usual barriers between species. As the meeting concluded and plans were made for Jamie's first consultation at the Titan facility, Korthak reflected on how much had changed since his first visit to Earth. A simple inspection tour had evolved into something approaching a revolution in how draconian society viewed capability and value. The implications extended far beyond corporate efficiency into questions about the fundamental nature of intelligence, strength, and worth. The transformation was not limited to the dragons present. Sarah had evolved from a terrified waitress into a confident liaison between species. Jamie had grown from an isolated disabled child into a recognized consultant whose insights were valued by the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Even the other human workers had begun to see themselves as potential contributors rather than mere servants. Most significantly, the relationship between dragons and humans at the facility had shifted from simple domination to something approaching collaboration. The change was subtle but unmistakable. Dragons still held ultimate authority, but they had begun to consult human perspectives on operational questions. The rigid hierarchy remained in place, but it had developed flexibility that allowed for input from unexpected sources. The experiment was far from over. Jamie's success at the Titan facility would determine whether his capabilities were unique or representative of broader human potential. The corporate board's reaction to these developments would shape how quickly and extensively such changes could spread throughout the empire. Most importantly, the response from other conquered species would reveal whether this new approach could transform draconian civilization itself. As Korthak prepared to depart for his next corporate obligation, he paused to observe Jamie and Sarah saying goodbye to the restaurant staff who had become their extended family. The scene embodied everything that made this situation so remarkable: a disabled child and his mother finding support and acceptance in the most unlikely circumstances, surrounded by beings who had learned to see past surface differences to recognize underlying value. The sight strengthened Korthak's conviction that his experiment in human potential was worth whatever risks it might entail. If a small restaurant in a conquered facility could become a place where species barriers dissolved and capabilities were recognized regardless of their source, then, perhaps the entire empire could learn to find strength in unexpected places. The journey ahead would test everyone involved, but, for the first time in his long existence, Korthak found himself optimistic about possibilities that extended beyond mere profit and power. He was witnessing the emergence of something that transcended traditional draconian values, a recognition that true strength might come from embracing rather than eliminating difference, from nurturing rather than destroying potential, and from building rather than simply conquering. The dragon tycoon who had built his fortune on recognizing opportunity was about to discover that his greatest opportunity might come from learning to see strength in the most unlikely places. 2 years had passed since Jamie's first consultation with Zarek, and the ripple effects of his success had transformed far more than anyone could have anticipated. The Titan facility had become the most efficient mining operation in the Empire, exceeding all previous performance records. More importantly, Jamie's methods had been adapted and implemented across 17 different installations, each one achieving similar improvements in productivity and worker satisfaction. The corporate board had finally taken official notice. What had begun as Korthak's personal experiment had evolved into a new operational philosophy that was spreading throughout the Draconian Empire. The phrase alternative consultation had entered the corporate vocabulary, referring to the practice of seeking insights from conquered species who demonstrated exceptional problem-solving abilities. Korthak's personal headquarters now included a dedicated wing for what he privately called his Special Projects Division. The staff included not just Jamie and Sarah, but a growing collection of individuals from various conquered species who had demonstrated remarkable capabilities despite being written off by traditional draconian assessment methods. A Zephyrian engineer whose crystalline physiology allowed him to detect structural weaknesses invisible to others. A molten world inhabitant whose heat tolerance enabled him to work in environments that would kill most dragons. A collective intelligence from the hive worlds whose distributed thinking could process data patterns that stumped individual minds. But Jamie remained the centerpiece of the operation, not just because he had been first but because his capabilities continued to evolve and expand. The boy who had started by reorganizing kitchen supplies was now consulting on galaxy-wide logistics networks, mining equipment design, and even strategic planning for new territorial acquisitions. Today's meeting was different from any that had come before. The corporate board had summoned Korthak to the imperial capital to present his findings to the Dragon Emperor himself. The summons was both an honor and a potential death sentence. If the Emperor approved of the alternative consultation program, it would become official policy throughout the Empire. If he disapproved, everyone involved would likely be eliminated for wasting imperial resources on inferior species. Korthak's transport ship was the largest and most luxurious vessel in his fleet, but for this journey it carried a cargo more precious than any mineral extraction: Jamie, Sarah, and 3 other members of his special consultation team. The boy had grown considerably during their 2 years together, not just in size but in confidence and sophistication. His speech had improved dramatically with proper medical treatment that Korthak had quietly arranged, and his analytical capabilities had expanded to encompass challenges that would intimidate trained specialists. Sarah had also transformed during their time in the corporate hierarchy. The frightened waitress had evolved into a skilled administrator who managed the complex logistics of interspecies consultation. She had learned to navigate draconian bureaucracy with remarkable skill, protecting her son and his colleagues from the casual cruelties that characterized imperial culture while ensuring their talents were properly utilized. The journey to the imperial capital took 3 days, giving everyone time to prepare for what would either be their greatest triumph or their final performance. Jamie spent the time refining his presentation, a comprehensive analysis of how alternative consultation had improved operations across multiple facilities and species. His data was overwhelming in its thoroughness and compelling in its implications for future imperial expansion. The imperial capital was a monument to draconian power that spanned an entire moon. Massive structures reached toward the void, their architecture designed to intimidate and inspire awe in equal measure. The Emperor's palace occupied the center of this vast construction, its towers disappearing beyond the range of normal vision. Everything about the environment was calculated to remind visitors of their insignificance compared to the might of the Draconian Empire. Korthak's party was escorted through corridors that could have housed entire cities, past chambers where the business of galactic conquest was conducted with ruthless efficiency. The scale was deliberately overwhelming, but Jamie seemed more fascinated than frightened by the grandeur surrounding them. His analytical mind was clearly cataloging architectural details and organizational structures, finding patterns and efficiencies even in the seat of ultimate power. The throne room itself defied description. The space was large enough to accommodate thousands of beings, with a ceiling that stretched up into shadows beyond sight. At the center, on a platform that elevated him above all others, sat Emperor Drakthon, the ancient dragon whose reign had lasted for 8 millennia and whose personal power was legendary throughout the galaxy. Drakthon was enormous even by draconian standards, his scales bearing the deep golden hue that came only with extreme age and accumulated power. His presence filled the vast chamber with an almost tangible sense of authority that made even senior executives struggle to maintain their composure. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute command backed by the might to destroy worlds. Korthak, the Emperor's voice rumbled across the chamber like distant thunder. You have requested an audience to present findings about alternative resource utilization. Proceed. The formal language was typical of imperial protocol, but everyone present understood the subtext. Korthak was being given the opportunity to justify his deviation from traditional draconian methods. Success would establish him as a visionary leader. Failure would result in immediate execution followed by the elimination of everyone associated with his experiments. Korthak stepped forward with the confidence born of absolute conviction in his data. Your Imperial Majesty, I present evidence that our empire has been underutilizing the intellectual capabilities of conquered species. Alternative consultation methods have produced efficiency improvements that exceed traditional approaches by significant margins. The Emperor's massive head tilted slightly, a gesture that indicated skeptical attention. Around the throne room, hundreds of draconian nobles and executives watched with the kind of predatory focus that anticipated either spectacular success or catastrophic failure. The political implications of this moment extended far beyond operational efficiency into questions about the fundamental nature of the empire itself. Show me, Drakthon commanded. What followed was the most important presentation in galactic history, though few of those present realized it at the time. Jamie stepped forward into a space designed to make individuals feel insignificant, faced an audience that included the most powerful beings in the known universe, and began to explain how cooperation between species could revolutionize imperial operations. His presentation was masterful. 2 years of experience had taught him how to communicate with draconian audiences, how to frame improvements in terms of profit and power rather than cooperation and equality. He presented data showing productivity increases, cost reductions, and efficiency improvements that far exceeded traditional methods. More importantly, he demonstrated how alternative consultation could accelerate imperial expansion by leveraging the unique capabilities of different species. The Emperor listened in silence as Jamie described optimization strategies that had transformed mining operations, logistics networks that utilized species-specific advantages, and problem-solving approaches that combined different types of intelligence for superior results. The boy's confidence never wavered despite the overwhelming presence of absolute power focused on his every word. When Jamie concluded his formal presentation, Emperor Drakthon remained silent for a long moment that seemed to stretch into eternity. The tension in the throne room was palpable as hundreds of beings waited for a decision that would reshape the empire or end in mass executions. Remarkable, the Emperor said finally. Your analysis suggests that we have been discarding valuable resources through our traditional assessment methods. The words sent a ripple of shock through the assembled nobility. No one had expected the Emperor to acknowledge even the possibility that draconian methods might be improved, let alone by insights from conquered species. However, Drakthon continued, and the qualification made everyone tense again. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. You speak of potential applications across the empire, but your evidence comes from a limited sample size. Can these methods truly scale to imperial proportions? Jaime's face lit up with excitement at the question. This was the challenge he had been preparing for throughout their journey. Your Majesty, I've prepared a comprehensive implementation plan for empire-wide expansion. The key is adapting the consultation protocols to the specific characteristics of different species and operational contexts. What followed was an even more impressive display of analytical thinking and strategic planning. Jaime outlined a systematic approach for identifying untapped capabilities among conquered species, training programs for draconian supervisors who would oversee alternative consultation teams, and quality control measures to ensure consistent results across diverse operations. His plan was ambitious but practical, visionary but grounded in detailed implementation strategies. More importantly, it was designed to work within existing imperial structures while gradually transforming them from within. The approach respected draconian authority while creating space for other forms of intelligence to contribute to imperial success. Emperor Drakthon leaned forward on his throne, his massive presence focusing on the small human with laser intensity. You propose to revolutionize an empire that has dominated the galaxy for 3 millennia. That is either remarkable vision or dangerous delusion. Which is it? The question was a test, and everyone in the room understood the stakes. Jaime's answer would determine not just the fate of alternative consultation but, potentially, the future direction of draconian civilization itself. Jaime met the Emperor's gaze without flinching, his voice clear and confident. Your Majesty, the Empire's strength has always come from recognizing and utilizing superior capabilities. Alternative consultation simply expands that principle beyond traditional boundaries. We're not changing what makes the Empire strong, we're making it stronger. The response was perfectly calibrated to appeal to draconian values while advocating for revolutionary change. Jaime had learned to frame cooperation as conquest, inclusion as expansion, and collaboration as dominance through superior strategy. The Emperor's expression was unreadable as he considered the implications of Jaime's proposal. Around the throne room, nobles and executives held their breath while waiting for a decision that would echo through galactic history. Zarek, Drakthon called suddenly, and the dragon who had first challenged Jaime's capabilities stepped forward. Your assessment of these alternative consultation methods? Zarek's response carried the weight of personal experience and professional credibility. Your Majesty, the Titan facility has exceeded all performance metrics since implementing these protocols. Production is up 47%, costs are down 32%, and worker efficiency has improved across all operational categories. The methods are proven and scalable. The endorsement was crucial because it came from a dragon who had initially opposed the entire concept. Zarek's conversion from skeptic to advocate provided compelling evidence that alternative consultation could win over even traditional draconian thinking. Emperor Drakthon rose from his throne with deliberate ceremony, his movement commanding absolute attention throughout the vast chamber. When he spoke, his words would become imperial policy that would shape the lives of trillions of beings across thousands of worlds. The evidence is compelling, he announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the throne room. Alternative consultation protocols will be implemented empire-wide under the direct supervision of Korthak and his specialized team. Facility managers who achieve superior results through these methods will be rewarded. Those who resist implementation will be replaced. The declaration sent shockwaves through the assembled nobility. In a single statement, the Emperor had officially endorsed the greatest change in imperial policy since the founding of the Draconian Empire. Alternative consultation was no longer an experiment, it was now the law of the land. But Drakthon was not finished. Furthermore, he continued, the human Jaime will be appointed as Imperial Consultation Coordinator, with authority to establish protocols and training programs throughout the Empire. He will report directly to the Imperial Council and receive protection commensurate with his position. The second announcement was even more revolutionary than the first. A human child with cerebral palsy had just been appointed to one of the highest positions in the galactic government, with authority that surpassed most draconian nobles. The transformation was so complete and unexpected that many of those present struggled to process what they had witnessed. Janie's reaction was characteristically direct. "Thank you, Your Majesty. When can I start reviewing the implementation schedules for the Outer Rim territories?" The question drew scattered laughter from the audience, not mockery but genuine amusement at the boy's immediate focus on practical details rather than the historic significance of his appointment. His response embodied everything that had made alternative consultation successful: the ability to see opportunity in any situation and the drive to pursue excellence regardless of obstacles. As the formal ceremony concluded and the imperial court began to disperse, Korthak found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. A simple business trip to inspect a mining facility had evolved into a fundamental transformation of galactic civilization. The dragon tycoon who had built his fortune on recognizing opportunity had just witnessed the greatest opportunity of his lifetime come to fruition. The changes ahead would be massive and complex. Training programs would need to be developed for thousands of facilities across hundreds of worlds. Assessment protocols would need to be created for dozens of different species with unique capabilities. Resistance from traditional draconian hierarchies would need to be overcome through patient education and demonstrated results. But the foundation had been established. The principle that strength could be found in unexpected places, that intelligence came in many forms, and that cooperation could be more powerful than domination had been officially recognized at the highest levels of imperial authority. As they prepared to leave the imperial capital and begin the enormous task of empire-wide implementation, Korthak observed Jamie and Sarah discussing logistics with several draconian officials who would have considered them barely worthy of notice just hours earlier. The sight symbolized everything that alternative consultation represented: the dissolution of artificial barriers between species, the recognition of intelligence wherever it might be found, and the transformation of conquest into collaboration. The experiment that had begun with a disabled human child explaining kitchen optimization to a dragon CEO had become a revolution that would reshape the galaxy. And, at its center stood Jamie, no longer a frightened boy with physical limitations but a confident young leader whose vision of cooperation and mutual respect was becoming the new foundation of interstellar civilization. The future would bring new challenges and unexpected opportunities, but one thing was certain: the galaxy would never be the same. The empire built on strength and domination was evolving into something unprecedented, a civilization that found power in diversity, wisdom in difference, and strength in the courage to trust the potential that existed in every sentient being, regardless of their origin or limitations. The dragon tycoon had discovered that his greatest investment was not in worlds or resources, but in the revolutionary idea that true strength came from recognizing and nurturing the capabilities that existed in the most unlikely places. And that investment was about to transform an empire.